Hello again. In this episode, we're going to address the question, how do I not ruin my children by just leaving them money? So I've seen this a lot in my career where very successful people have millions of dollars maybe, and they think, well, whatever my kids do with the money I leave behind when I die is their problem. No, it's yours. It's like throwing a rock in a pond. What you choose to do with what you leave behind will affect generations. It ripples for generations. So I'm going to share with you the secret to empower those that you care about so you don't ruin them by just leaving them money and dumping it in their lap, by using equal opportunities instead of equal distribution of your financial assets. I'm Doug Andrew, and I've been very passionate about what I'm going to share with you right now as I use an example of two families that will contrast the difference between just dumping money in your children or grandchildren, your posterity's lap, versus leaving behind a system that will foster responsibility and accountability. If you've watched some of our other episodes, and if you haven't had a chance, when you get done, watch this one where I talk about the three dimensions of authentic wealth. This A stands for abundance. And we want to be balanced between the financial, the foundational, and intellectual assets. And what I do to illustrate this is I share the story of the Vanderbilt family versus the Rothschilds. Now, I don't endorse these families by any means, but they will illustrate my point. Cornelius Vanderbilt, known as Commodore, was like the Bill Gates of his time, richest man on earth when he died in 1877. Amassed a $105 million fortune by then. Steamships, railroads, so forth, the transportation industry. Now, he wasn't very philanthropic. In fact, he only left behind less than 1% of his wealth, $1 million, to Central University, which became Vanderbilt University. Do you know it took 96 years until 1972 before 120 of his descendants gathered together at Vanderbilt University for their first family reunion? And there wasn't a millionaire left in the bunch. It was all gone. I mean, we call it shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in three generations. The second generation Vanderbilts, they were okay, but the third generation, they were so entitled. And by the end of the third generation, going to the fourth, they were like, what? It's all gone? We're now one of them. We have to work. It was unbelievable. They were rolling up their shirt sleeves again, starting all over, because he did not set up a system to require some skin in the game, is what I call it, to work. They had just been sitting there collecting like a clam on the bottom of the ocean, plankton floating to them. This is not just unique to the Vanderbilts. In Asia, those wealthy families who just dumped it in their kids' lap, it's rice paddy, back to rice paddy in three generations. In Europe, it's clogs to clogs in three generations. In fact, Cornelius Vanderbilt's grandson, William K. Vanderbilt, said, "It has left me with nothing to hope for, nothing definite to seek or strive for. Inherited wealth has been a real handicap to happiness." Whoa. Now, I contrast the Vanderbilt family with the Rothschilds. Now, Mayer Amschel Rothschild, he died in 1812, and he built a banking dynasty in Europe, and he had several children, among them 5 living sons. And they assigned each of those sons to European capitals, and they would communicate back and forth with homing pigeons, when to buy and when to sell. The point is, when he died in 1812, he did not leave behind an inheritance or an entitlement. He left behind a system, a repository, where he captured the wisdom, the knowledge, the attitude, the skills, and the habits, and he left behind how to fish instead of dumping fish in their lap. And he had 3 basic rules. Now, I call this the family bank. This is not a chartered bank like down the street. This is the conceptual bank, a repository for KASH, cash. That's an acronym that stands for knowledge, attitudes, skills, and habits. He had 3 basic rules. they loaned their heirs money and the loans had to be repaid, or they went into joint ventures. If you needed help with a college education, you had to have good grades. You had to apply just like any student loan. If you got approved, you borrowed at a nominal interest rate, and when you graduated, you paid that loan back so that your kids and grandkids would have the same wherewithal. Once you graduated, if you wanted to start a business, you could borrow and pay it back, or you went into a joint venture and you gave the family bank that percent of that business venture. It wasn't some special favor because you're a family member, other than the interest rate might be a little bit better than a traditional banking institution. But see, this is where when I went to college, my parents couldn't afford to pay for my college, nor my wife. I came from a family of 6, as did my wife, Sherry. And so we didn't expect our parents to do that. I got scholarships and grants and loans. I worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken 30 hours a week in college. My wife worked at a bookstore. We actually had better study habits than many of our friends whose parents were just sort of shelling it out. So when we had our 6 children, we didn't want any of them to ever think we would just pay for their college. We didn't. We gave our children equal opportunities, not equal distribution. What do I mean? If they wanted a semester abroad in Israel or Egypt or New Zealand, which many of them did, they had to come in with a solution formulator, and they had to come up with skin in the game. They had to sell their motorcycle or their car or do something. And if they didn't have enough resources themselves, then they might borrow. But they never ask, Mom, Dad, will you pay for? Can I have? No, would you loan me $1,500 out of the family bank, and I will pay it back in 3 months? And I'd say, take the pressure off. You need a new car when you get back. Just pay $300 a month in 5 months. And if you can't earn the money, then you can paint or shampoo carpets or mow lawns. They all, directly or indirectly, paid for their college education. And so that's the concept in number 1. Number 2, the knowledge and experiences those heirs gained had to be shared with other family members horizontally, not just vertically. This wasn't family secrets, parents to kids to grandkids. This was aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews. Sharing is having more. And so you had to share your wisdom, your bad and good experiences, so everybody else could learn. And this was put into the family archive or record. If this were the United States of America, this would be the Constitution. These are the rules of governance on how you're going to allow your children to have access to the knowledge, attitudes, skills, and habits, and the money. So I'm going to give you an example of how to do this under equal opportunity. So again, this would be like the Constitution. These are your family rules of governance. And I'm going to give you an example of how we do this in workshops that we do with couples who want to set up their trust to be under these equal opportunities rather than equal distribution. Because most estate planning attorneys, once they find out your net worth, what's the first question they ask you? How many kids have you got? Because what are they going to start doing? Dividing it up. That's the number 1 rule if you want to destroy. Divide and conquer. No, united we stand. Divided we fall. And so they usually take your assets and put it in a boilerplate trust document. And then they take your assets and your kids' names, and when you die, chunk, 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 it's divided up and dumped in their laps, ruining half of the kids in this country. And they sit around, when do I get my share? Well, instead of that, a lot of people change from equal distribution to equal opportunity, because I teach them that there's nothing more unequal than the equal distribution to unequals. And they go, say again? There's nothing more unequal than the equal distribution to unequals. Our Creator does not give equal distribution of blessings, let's say of health, to all of us, regardless of how some of us may choose to abuse our bodies. Our Creator gives us equal opportunities, but He doesn't say, even though you've been abusing your body, I'm going to give you the same health as this person over here who's working out and eating right and everything like that. No, equal opportunities. So then they want to change their trust by doing that. So before I show you that, let me show you the 3rd rule. The family gathered at least once a year to reaffirm its virtues and intentions, or they couldn't participate in the perpetual family fund, what I call the family bank. So this is the concept where you had to constantly gather together and agree. If this were the United States of America, this would be the Declaration of Independence. It's a values and vision document. It's a motto. a slogan, a manifesto. I have all of them, and I have certain laws of abundance that we abide by in our family. They're posted, and we also have a values and vision document in all three dimensions. But it's really understanding here that this false belief pattern that equal distribution is the fairest way to treat those you care about. No, it's equal opportunities. But you have to have rules of governance. And so, for example, when people come through a workshop, I give them this little worksheet and they talk as partners about the perpetual cash fund. Now remember, cash is knowledge, attitude, skills, and habits. And we're talking about all three dimensions. But as they go through, I'm just going to read to you some of the categories that they want to talk about. How are we going to empower our posterity with business loans or ventures, charitable contributions, community service, education. Many people say, well, for every dollar their posterity earns towards college or in a scholarship, they'll match dollar for dollar up to one PhD. Maybe for the purchase of your first home, I have some that say we'll match dollar for dollar up to $100,000 for the purchase of your first home, but then they're on their own. But they have to read my books on how to not use that in an unnecessary down payment that's illiquid. That's some of the stipulations some of them choose. But health and medical, we use proactive things like if you want to join a health center or a gym or hire a nutritionist, I would rather prevent the disease, and so we'll match dollar for dollar for a membership at a gym or with a personal trainer, rather than have to pay for rehab to correct or cure the disease, whether it's physical or mental or emotional or what have you. Military service, personal loans, religious service, humanitarian retreats, family vacations, weddings. I have one client who filled this out, and they believe in significant honeymoons rather than lavish weddings. And so if they use it for a significant honeymoon, then they get $5,000 as a wedding gift, but they cannot use it for a wedding. So those are called rules of governance. And when you do that, you are then empowering your children that they have to have skin in the game. You can have this, you can borrow, you can have matching funds, you must pay it back through either money or working, and that way they have skin in the game, and you will not ruin your children by just leaving behind a bunch of money and they get this entitlement mindset. I would recommend you watch this video if this is resonating with you to understand how to abolish entitlement mindset and get a free copy of my book, Entitlement Abolition. I'll just fire it out to you absolutely free. You just pay a nominal shipping and handling fee, and you'll understand how to do this even better. This is to your brighter future, because I know you care about your children and grandchildren, but that doesn't mean you're always bailing them out and rescuing them. You want to give them a hand up, never a hand out.